Hey everybody, welcome to episode 10 of Frank About Health. I'm Frank Harrison, and we're going to talk today about integrative medicine. I'm calling it Frank About Integrative Medicine. However, I have a special guest on with me, which I'll announce shortly, and we're going to take the platform of disabilities. My logic is stemming from last week's episode, which was a re-recording of neuropsychiatric disorders, particularly major depressive disorder, and your conscious consultant was very informative about the way to look at it from a positive point of view. So I decided from the mind-body spectrum that since we covered the mind last week, we're going to cover the body. Another personal reason why we're going to do that is because, as I've been mentioning since this show aired, I suffer from epilepsy, and in my case, it is a genetic disorder, or at least I inherited epilepsy through genetic means. So today we're going to talk about developmental disorders. Janet Neal, who you will hear soon or hear shortly, will be able to talk about it from various aspects where genetics are involved. And I figured the two that I want to discuss are autism and Down syndrome as a platform, so she and I can have an informative and educational conversation about these disorders. They are genetic, as I've mentioned, but there are integrative solutions to treating them. Because I've also been saying over the last 10 weeks, the important issue is quality of life. I said the variable QOL because when you understand with the disorder that you have, and let's say it's of the developmental kind, you want to know exactly how to improve your quality of life, especially since these disorders in particular are pretty much lifelong. So, I'd like to introduce to you all out there to Ms. Janet Neal. I had the opportunity to meet her through a mutual friend of ours who has been on this show, Retha Gray. And she is a commissioner on the LA Commission of Disabilities. Very informative woman. Also had the opportunity for her own radio show. I want her to explain her background because for me, when I heard it, I was amazed. So, Janet, I hear you out there.
Yes.
Thank you for coming on the show today. As I mentioned to you, this is a very important show because it kind of wraps up what I've been discussing over the last 10 weeks, and hopefully it'll open up a new chapter as I continue. So everyone out there, I'd like to introduce you once again to Ms. Janet Neal.
Thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to the public about disability-related issues. Here in Los Angeles, I have a pretty extensive background in advocacy for the general population of people with disabilities, but I started off in preschool. I did some study through the Veterans Administration and UCLA in a human services program, and I decided I wanted to focus on preschoolers because I felt that there was something that was not being addressed that was trailing over into elementary school and junior high school, with some behavior issues, where you have children with undiagnosed disabilities as young as 2 years old.
Right.
Very often it's denial of the parent, or they just don't know what to look for, and some of these children ended up being later diagnosed with autism, or I didn't have any particular children that had Down syndrome. My experience with them came much later, but there is a trend today to use the term special needs, which I absolutely hate.
Yes.
Because I think it does
Generic.
not tell you what it is that you need to deal with or how to address it.
Right.
I've had conversations with parents that have used the term, and they have expressed some behavior problems with the child because the child knew something was wrong, but not what and what to do.
Right.
They just felt left out or odd,
Right.
which is where I came in, because I like for everyone to feel included, you know?
Correct.
Like for everybody to be able to participate on the level that they have the ability to participate on. So,
Correct.
I think this is probably why Retha,
Yes.
Miss Retha,
Yeah.
referred me to you, because she knows how long I've been at this. I've known Rita since probably junior high school.
Wow.
And at that time, my disability was undiagnosed. I didn't get diagnosed until I was 31 years old. And it was just really difficult for me because I was hearing all the time, because it is an orphan disease. I don't see anything wrong, so I was accused of making it up for attention. The problem was I was a concert pianist, so whenever I wanted attention, all I had to do was play the piano, and I got more attention than I wanted.
Interesting.
So I've always just been concerned about how people fit in, and being an advocate has allowed me to bring a lot of self-esteem and self-respect to people with disabilities. And as I said, I work with children, and it was really, really important to see the light in their eyes when they recognize, oh, maybe I can't do this the way somebody else does it, but I can still do it.
Correct. I mean, I know that
I mentioned to you my favorite slogan that I brought with me is disabled doesn't mean unable.
Yes, I found that to be very instrumental for even myself, because I use the slogan, perception is everything. And I guess, epilepsy has a neuro component for a lot of people, and it sometimes has been mistaken for a form of autism, but we are aware that that really is not the case, because there are so many variables surrounding something like epilepsy. But from what you've told me, especially from the fact that you've had to deal with the understanding of these disorders in the early years of the child as they're developing, it kind of creates the perception, as most people don't fully understand it, that in some cases they're referred to as retarded, or they don't fit in. I was just getting ready to say that was the basket that everything was put into. In fact, even with my sister, she was diagnosed, we can use that, as being 6 months retarded. Well, what does that mean? Exactly.
How does that translate into, now this, we're talking about back in the 50s. And they didn't know anything about autism or Down syndrome as they do today. And this is why, in my opinion, it fell into the orphan disease category at that point in time.
Can you define
when you translate that into today, I think it means that she could have autism.
Interesting.
So the autism is a spectrum. And the reason I'm saying this, and I don't mean to call my sister out or anything, but I've tried to help her. And I've talked to mental health professionals to try and get at how she could be helped, and it was very clear that's probably what it was, is some form of autism.
Now, can you define exactly for the listeners out there orphan disease? I know you mentioned to me it's a category or a cluster.
It's a basket that they toss things into that they have no idea what it is. There aren't enough people with it for anybody to do any research, because they don't see how they're going to make any money off of it. And it gets stuck into orphan disease category until there are enough people with it for them to do some research. And I'm going to use autism as an example, because before Holly Robinson Peete and Autism Speaks came into being, there wasn't very much being done or known about the disease until because it was in her family. I believe it's her children that have it. There just wasn't a lot of information or research or treatment for it. It's just all of these children were being treated as, quote, retarded, unquote. And I say it that way because that has become sort of an offensive word that we're trying to get people not to use.
Correct. I mean, I figure I should have, just create a little definition for everyone out there. I mean, I know that you and I are very familiar with these disabilities and these neurological disorders, but I guess for those who want to be able to understand the core behind autism before we really further delve into the kind of integrative solutions we can do for people who want to live a better life with it, I figure I want to point out that autism in particular is a neurodevelopmental disorder and is characterized by impairment in things like social interaction, verbal and nonverbal communication, restrictive and repetitive behavior. And the diagnostic criteria always seems to be with symptoms that become apparent before age 3. Autism is highly heritable, but researchers suspect both environmental and genetic factors are causes, but even my opinion is that that's putting it into a cluster as well. Autism does affect information processing in the brain by altering how nerve cells and their synapses connect. These comparisons to Asperger's, for example, and other rare cases like epilepsy, it really is not a connection to them. They have their own construct, but it is essentially a unique developmental disorder with behavioral intervention and a lot of challenges as they are going through that treatment. And I guess for everyone who's out there, what I know that Janet's going to be helping us explain, especially in the next segment, is how we can be able to take autism from the perspective of the neurological foundation it has, or even the genetic foundation it has, and show how it can be used, as I call, as an asset. I have a very good friend of mine whose sister has Down syndrome, and I'm familiar with the fact that Down syndrome has a lot of opportunities for people to construct devices, put puzzles together at super speed, even be able to take apart a television and redesign it, among other things. I think that's all about object relations and the ability to, and in that particular case, use that development disorder for the purpose of helping out. Our friend Retha had mentioned she had a nephew who had autism, and apparently when his mother died, the siblings, I think a sister and a couple brothers, couldn't cope with the grief, but because autism has an affective component to it that isn't developed, he was the strength behind the family coping for that death. So I find them both intriguing, and I really want to explore more about autism and at the same time get into Down syndrome, but it appears that we're about to take a small break. And again, thank you for being here, Janet. I'm looking forward to us communicating even further.
All right.
All right. Hear you in a bit.
You're listening to the